Hello and welcome. I'm Cynthia Alice Anderson, and for the past 8 years, it has been my absolute joy to share these conversations and spiritual practices with listeners around the world. Right now, we're in the middle of our $9,000 in 90 days campaign to help keep these messages freely available for everyone who needs them. If our channel has brought you encouragement or peace, I invite you now to help carry it forward with a gift of any amount. You can learn more and donate using the link in the show description. And now, let's begin. Hello and welcome to the Experience of the Soul podcast. My name is Cynthia Alice Anderson. I'm lovingly known as RCA. I'm the host. I'm also the owner and founder. And my friends, we welcome you into the show today. As always, I'm excited to bring you the show. And I'm in the studio with my producer, Mr. Sean Kilgore.
Hello, friends. So happy to be here with you. Welcome in for episode 421 of Experience of the Soul. Free your soul, intellect versus intuition.
Yeah, we're going to get in it today.
Yeah, we're so glad you're here for it. Today's conversation obviously is all about finding the balance between what we know and what we sense.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, but first let's take a look at...
description.
Oh, thanks. I had a feeling I knew what was coming. Of course, we want to first take a look at what's happening this week in spiritual history and otherwise. So we start with this Wednesday, July 15th, is World Youth Skills Day. So,
like that.
Yeah, isn't that cool? So this day was established by the United Nations to recognize the importance of helping young people build practical skills for work and for life. Mm-hmm. So schools, community organizations, and employers around the world use the day to highlight education, job training, and mentoring. So this is actually, I thought, kind of a good reminder that learning doesn't stop when we leave school, or it doesn't always happen in a classroom. We are always constantly growing and learning as we age into adulthood and beyond.
I hope we are.
Right, exactly. We should be.
We
right?
Should be.
If
we want to be.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, we want to be.
Yeah. And sometimes the best lessons come from the people that we meet out in the real world and not necessarily from a school book or from a classroom.
Amen to that.
Willing to share what they've learned. And I really kind of felt like, for me, that really rings true. Like when I got out into the working world, while I was in college and meeting older people and becoming friends with older people.
Oh, yes.
I learned so much more about life and the direction I should be going in from other people, from mentors that I met, in the theater world and
absolutely.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
So I thought that was a really kind of a cool thing. So I want to lift up that for today. Also this week on Thursday, July 16th, many Christians observe the Feast of Our Lady of Mount Carmel. So this day honors Mary, the mother of Jesus, and has its roots in a Christian community that formed centuries ago on Mount Carmel in present-day Israel.
Yes.
So for many Catholics and other Christians, this is a day centered on prayer, devotion, and remembering Mary's example of faith and trust.
Amen. I tell you, without Mary, we would have no Jesus.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
Then on Saturday, July 18th, it's Nelson Mandela International Day. So the United Nations created this observance to honor Nelson Mandela's lifelong commitment to justice, equality, and reconciliation in South Africa. So one tradition associated with the day is, and I thought this was cool, spending 67 minutes of your day this coming Saturday, so July 18th. Spend 67 minutes of your day serving others. Now, this represents the 67 years that Nelson Mandela devoted to public service. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a simple idea, but
love it.
If everyone just gave a little bit of their time to help someone else, those small acts would add up to something pretty extraordinary.
Well, they do, and it's funny that you mentioned this, Sean, because coming up, in the next several episodes, we have this whole series on Free Your Soul, and service is a very important part of it.
Yeah, so it ties in perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
Now, finally, it's so funny because we've been doing this segment for probably a little over a year now, because this, just for fun, I remember talking about it last year. So it's come around again this year, friends. It is time once again for National Ice Cream Day on this Sunday, July 19th. Now, of course, we talked about it last year, been celebrated in the United States since the 1980s after President Ronald Reagan proclaimed a national day recognizing ice cream as one of America's favorite treats. See, Reagan,
actually, by today's standards, Reagan would be a raving liberal.
Yes. Which is funny to think about.
Yeah.
So now, obviously, we're not here to settle the great debate over chocolate, vanilla, or cookies and cream. That is between you and your freezer, but enjoy a little bowl of ice cream today.
Well, I know the old jazz standard. Let's call the whole thing off.
Yep.
There's that line. You like vanilla. I like vanilla.
Depends on where you're from.
Yeah.
All right, my friends. This week's journal prompt is: when have you learned your most important lesson outside of a classroom? I thought that might be a good thing to journal about. I actually did a little journaling on that when I was writing this segment, just because it did make me think of some of the mentors and people that I had met when I was younger, in my 20s, and getting out into the world.
Great journal prompt, and I'm glad you mentioned. I'm always glad when you mention journaling, Sean, because there's several young people in my life that I'm really encouraging to journal, and they are journaling every day. And I'll tell you, we would have a very different societal challenges than we have if every young person learned to journal their thoughts, their goals, put thoughts down on paper, because it helps you be less reactive. It helps you be more thoughtful, more, as we would say in today's world, mindful about your actions. And
knowing that those thoughts are between you and that piece of paper, I think is so there's
important.
A safety in that. There is a comfort in that. There's you just gotta make sure you lock them up.
Yeah, exactly. Lock them up. Right. Not the kids, the journals.
No, the journals. Yeah, I should clarify. They're like, that's why you never had kids.
Yeah, right.
All right, my friends, with that, we are into this week's episode. Once again, this is episode 421 of Experience of the Soul. Free your soul. Intellect versus intuition.
Yes, this is a wonderful topic to talk about. And in my preparation this morning, I had a really meaningful time of preparation in that I was really guided by my intuition to take my time. And I am used to a 20 to 30 minute window that I get to present. And so I'm going to slow down my presentation style a little bit today. I think it's very, very important that we understand how to differentiate between our intellect and our intuition. And Sean made a very important distinction at the beginning. Sean, do you mind repeating what you said? Do you remember that statement?
Yeah, the conversation is about finding the balance between what we know and what we sense.
What we know and what we sense. That's a great descriptor. Yeah. And, I first learned to differentiate this by one of my important teachers, Jane Elizabeth Hart, and I've mentioned her on the show many times. And so this is another tip of the hat to her, honoring her and her legacy. And I cannot overstate the importance of this teaching. The world as we know it today is living at the level of the intellect. And by intellect, I don't mean we're doing things smartly. I mean the intellect is what we think of today as the mind. And the mind is rooted in limits. The mind is rooted in staying safe. It's rooted in what we often call in spiritual circles the ego, but it's really the personality. But I also want you to know that your mind does contain memory. And so even though spiritually sometimes the ego gets demonized, it's not that your ego is evil, it's that your ego is limited. So the intellect of the mind by itself is limited. You don't have access to infinite knowledge through the mind. That is through intuition and the soul. So I want you to think of it as I'm speaking about it today. When I say the word intellect, remember what I'm meaning is the physical mind. What I'm meaning is the personality self that gets established as we're seeking love, as we're growing and maturing. And we all know, because so many of our listeners, I know I'm speaking directly to you and saying, we all know how the personality was shaped. It was shaped by family systems, by what we call the family code. And we know that the personality was shaped by us trying to get love, by us trying to feel safe and secure. And so we learned to limit ourselves. We learned to do things a certain way so that we would receive what we needed to survive. So those things are not all bad by any means. And as a matter of fact, it was a part of our survival. But many of us as adults are living as if the intellect is all that we are, instead of realizing there's something else that's available to us, which we often call intuition, which really means listening to the voice of the soul. It's almost like the intellect of the mind is the personality, and the intellect of the soul is intuition. And so I want you to think about that, just to slow down and think about that. Because for most of us, as we go throughout life, we are constantly identifying with the ego self, the personality self, the one that wants to look good, the aspect of us that wants to be liked, the aspect of us that wants to know it all, the aspect of us that always wants to be right, So the mind in itself is not bad, but realizing the mind's right place and the mind's limits. So the mind is very helpful with some things. It helps you balance your checkbook. It helps you analyze situations. It will help you think about, next steps in life. Those are all good things. It will also help you stay safe in, outward situations. It helps you judge the external. And it does this through years of evolution, even using what we often demonize too, that reptilian brain, that is that reactive brain. And so that has been very helpful throughout our growth and evolution. The problem is, my friends, that we are seeking to evolve above just the intellect. And so it becomes important to be able to differentiate between my intellect and intuition. And so let me mention a very easy way to begin to differentiate to distinguish or differentiate between intellect and intuition. So if you have a craving for something, a craving is personality and intellect based. If you are constantly focused on something in the outer, like I have to have this car, I have to have this boat, I have to have this house, I have to have this amount of money, those are all intellect/mind based. In other words, they are false cravings that once you get them, you'll crave again. There's no lasting effects. But a desire to know God, a desire to be in forgiveness, a desire to be grateful, a desire to be in my oneness consciousness, all of these things are lasting. And it doesn't mean if we have things, if we have cars, if we have boats, that those are all intellect-based. It means they can be intellect-based, but they can also be intuition-based if we attract those things out of our consciousness of abundance and knowing that God is the source of all of those things. So I'm hoping this is helping to slow it down a little bit, because our mind is very limited. It's connected to the here and now. Yes, it has memory, but our intuitive self, which again, I think of it as the intellect of the soul, is connected to here and now, but it is also connected to eternity itself, because intuition is of the soul. And so let's talk about what is intuition a little bit more, because I feel like I started too deep. So for me, intuition is knowing what is mine to do, when and how to do it. It is this awareness, this guidance that flows through me and to me to know these are my next indicated steps to take. Sometimes, as Sean said, it is the sensing. It is a knowing. Sometimes people will experience intuition as getting, I have a friend that calls them God bumps, when you get goosebumps.
Yeah, goosebumps. That's what we always call them, goosebumps. Yeah,
Well, in the South, some people call it chicken skin.
Oh, I've heard that too.
Chicken skin. Yeah. I have a friend that goes, oh, I know this is right because I got God bumps. And so, in other words, her body is literally working with her soul and helping her be aware that what's coming forward in this internal guidance is of the divine nature. And so what I think is important for us all to know is we all have a human mind and we all have intuition. The issue is learning to distinguish between the two and, working with it on a regular basis so that we get more and more aware of what our soul is leading us to instead of these momentary cravings. And we talked about this a few shows ago, Sean. I'm not sure if you remember, where we were talking about the difference between a young soul and an old soul, right? The young soul's the one with the most toys wins. This is obviously of the intellect, even though you would say intellect, oh, it's kind of dumb. But yeah, but meaning the mind. But the soul can see that and know, oh, that's funny. The one with the most toys just has the most toys, right? It's like kind of nothing more to it. Yeah, it's not very meaningful at all. And so this becomes fun when you're on the spiritual journey in a very serious way, in a very elevated way, that you're seeking to experience God through this internal knowing, this internal awareness. And that's really what intuition is. So I want you to also, though, be aware that the way you receive intuition, which is, again, this internal guidance, the way you sense, as Sean said, as the way you sense your divine guidance, it might be very different from the way I do it. And often on the show, I talk about my spiritual journey. I talk about, I received guidance to do such and such. And sometimes people will say to me, well, I've never heard a voice. And I go, I don't hear a voice either. Oh, well, they'll say, you said you received guidance. I said, oh, yes, I did. But what I mean is I had this sense of what was mine to do, and it was very, very clear. And most often, I don't hear a voice telling me. I have this internal awareness that is energetic. And so what I've learned the difference is in my own self is that if it's of the intellect, it's given pros and cons. It's like trying to convince me, do this, do that, do this, do that. No, don't do this, do that. So there's a lot of arguing in my mind when it is of the intellect. It's a back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Well, what about this? What about that? And when it's intuition, it is what the Bible calls, the still small voice. Not necessarily an outer voice, but just this sense, as Sean said, this sense, this knowing, this awareness. And it does very often come in this very quiet way. But what I notice is that there's no arguing. There's no rush. It simply waits on me to notice it. I had a situation, I was talking to Sean right before coming on the air, and I did talk about it recently in a message. And to be honest, I'm still working with the impacts of the situation. I say that because it's rare that I share something that I haven't processed all the way through, but I felt it was important when talking about intuition because sometimes we get a sense to do something and we don't know why that is. Like, for instance, I had a friend who was very guided to go do her laundry at a laundromat. She was sitting at home on a Saturday, and she was resting on her couch, and she got the idea that she was supposed to go to the laundromat to do her laundry. And she's very, very spiritual. And she said, this is crazy. Why would I do that? But the guidance came through very strongly. So she got her laundry together, went to the laundromat, and as she was sitting there, a woman walked in, and she knew at that moment that was going to be her spiritual teacher. And the spiritual teacher had no laundry. She just walked in and said, I know I was supposed to be here today. I'm not kidding. This is how it happens. So when you live at this level of intuition, there is a great deal of trust. So what happened with me the other day was something that I never imagined happening. I was at an event. I was speaking at an event, and the event was going a little bit late. One of my friends who'd come to the event to support was needing to leave early. She's a little bit older than me, and she's kind of small of stature like I am, but I didn't want her going out alone because the event was downtown and she had parked several blocks away. So I said, I am being very guided to go with you. She said, it's okay, Rev. I said, no, let me talk to the organizer. And I had to talk to the organizer, who's a very dear friend. And I said, my friend, I know I'm one of the leads here, but I'm being very guided. I need to, walk out with my friend. He said, oh, well, your part's over. Go ahead. I know you've got a long drive. And so I walked her down and everything. And I said, you know what? I want you to come with me to my vehicle, and then I will drive you to yours because mine's not very far. And so she was parked in an area of Orlando that there's a lot of people on the street. There is a great deal of homelessness and things in that area. So I was so glad I did that. Well, right after I dropped her off, I turned the corner and I was headed for the freeway. And as I was pulling up to the light, luckily I wasn't going super fast, an individual fell on the downtown street in front of me in such a way that I could see that he was impaired. So I opened my door, I ran, to help him and everything, and the situation moved on. There was a woman there with 2 dogs. We worked together and tried to get him the right help. But what I know is, I am sure that by me being there at that time saved that man's life, or it could have. And what I know is that the only reason I was there at that exact moment was because my intuition guided me to leave. And my intuition, all my mind could see, was as far as helping my friend. But my soul somehow knew something way past that. And this is what I want to describe to you that's super important about learning to trust this voice, is that the mind doesn't always consciously know why your intuition is guiding you to do a certain thing at a certain time, but the soul of you does know. And so then in retrospect, the mind starts putting things together and says, oh, now I see why that was my guidance. But from a real personal level, I could not see that situation was going to present. But I know that at least for that night, we saved his life. I know that. And she did too. The person that walked up with 2 dogs helped him from falling a second time. He was clearly under the influence of drugs. And she pulled him by the shirt and helped him from falling in the street a second time, and then went around to the fire department and all of that. But the important point about this story is that the guidance that I followed helped me help another human being for one more day. And this is why I rely on my intuition at the level that I do. What I've learned is that intuition gets better as we practice it. I had a friend the other day call and said, I need to talk to you. You're the guidance guru. And I said, well, I'm not a guidance guru. He goes, yeah, but I've seen you live your life for so long by your internal guidance, and I see how God is guiding you. And I said, oh, thank you so much. I said, well, what can I do? He goes, I just wonder if I should do it. And I said, well, I don't even know what you're talking about. I said, dude, I can't help you. I said, but here's what I can say. If your guidance is that strong that you feel this much energy around it, and you're just checking in with me, check in with yourself, and you will absolutely know what's yours to do. And he was like, you're right. I do know. I'm going for it. I said, there we go. There we go. So a lot of times people ask me, what if I get it wrong? Oh my gosh. Somebody will say, I tried to follow my guidance and I got it wrong. And I'll say, well, how did you get it wrong? What do you mean? Well, what I thought was going to happen didn't happen. And I say, well, that doesn't mean you got it wrong. That just means you got attached to the outcome. And that's the intellect again. That's the ego wanting to say, if I do this, then this. But this is why I gave you those two circumstances of my friend going to the laundromat and then my situation with helping my friend. I didn't know when the guidance was there what was going to happen. I just knew it was mine to do. So if you're early in this, learning to follow your intuition, which again is your internal guidance, we should call it that, my IGS, my internal guidance system. I like that. Yeah, my internal guidance system. It's learning to follow that. But sometimes we get guidance simply to help us learn to listen to this voice. Because, as I said, we don't grow up learning this, most of us. Luckily, the kids that grow up in unity, we were just talking about that too on a show a few weeks ago, the kids that grow up in unity, the kids that grow up in some other faiths as well, learn to meditate, they learn to still the mind, and in fact, they learn to listen to this internal voice and move forward in a very powerful way. They learn the difference between, the daily mechanism of the mind and the intellect of the soul, which is your intuition. So I want you to think about this, that as you practice more with your intuition, I want you to take small steps in learning to listen to this guidance. I don't want you to leave a 20-year relationship overnight. I don't want you to quit your job tomorrow because you think that's what you're supposed to do. I want you to start with really small ways if this is new to you. If it is not new to you, I want you to ask yourself if you can expand your awareness of how your intuition is trying to guide you in everyday moments. Because it will and it does. And as you follow the guidance, I want you to do your best to not get attached to what the outcome is. Simply follow the guidance and notice what happens and then journal about that. Write it down. Send yourself a voice memo. Whatever way you record some of your spiritual activity, write it down and become more conscious, become more aware. Was I listening to my intuition? Was that my guidance? Or was that just my mind? And so again, to differentiate, the intellect of the mind is about immediate results. The intuition is often a sensed awareness about what is yours to do, and it will be something that lasts. There will typically not be a lot of activity in the mind if it is your intuition. It will be sensed at the level of the heart. It will be sensed sometimes even at the level of the body. And that movement forward is an act of trust. And that's what I want to tell you, is to trust the process. So differentiating between the mind, the intellect / personality, and your intuition is going to be for you, my friends, a daily practice. Anyone serious on the spiritual journey that I know is doing this very practice. I have a sibling in the Baptist church, and he would talk about I serve God, I serve Jesus, I serve him, and I do what he guides. And I understand that as intuition. So the process I would invite you into to awaken your intuition, which is very, very important, is to meditate every single day. Meditate every single day, even if it's only 5 minutes. And if your meditation is 10 deep breaths and then journaling your day, or, setting your intention for the day, that's a great place to start. If it is doing the morning pages and doing your I am and your gratitude steps in my journal, do that. But always spend a little bit of time in silence if you can, because that silence connects you with that still small voice, that voice of God, that voice of the soul that comes in and through us, that is your own soul's intuition. And remember that intuition is the voice of the soul. It is the connection between your soul and the here and now. It is the connection between your soul and all of eternity. So, my friends, trust the process. Trust that you know that how you are being guided. Trust that you know the difference between the mind and this voice of the intuition. and work with it. You may find that the voice in your mind is very, very different than the voice of the soul. And the only way you will know this is to practice it every day. And then as you practice it in the little ways, the larger life decisions will come forward for you. And rather than making a split decision or writing a list of pros and cons, you will have this sense, this knowing, and this awareness of what is yours to do, and you will be given the tools to do it. So if you need an affirmation to work with this, one of the ones I've used for a very long time, if I get in a place of question, I will say something very similar to this. I know what is mine to do, when, and how to do it. God is guiding me. I know what is mine to do, when, and how to do it. I know God is guiding me. I will listen until I hear that voice. And so, my friends, this is my hope for you, that you will live more and more from the level of the soul by listening and tapping into your intuition, and that you will begin to see in the outer world real-life examples of just how interested the universe is in you and your process. I'm praying with you and for you. I am lifting you in the light of God as you know this truth. My friends, if I can support you in any way, reach out. We're honored, we're blessed to support your journey. And thank you for your support as we move forward on the Experience of the Soul podcast. Have a great, great week, and we look forward to hearing from you about your journey. Many blessings.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Experience of the Soul with Cynthia Alice Anderson. If this message resonated with you, we invite you to share it with someone who might need it today. This show is made possible by listeners like you, and we're grateful for the community that helps keep these conversations available for everyone. You can learn more or contribute to the show at cynthiaaliceanderson.com/donate. Produced by Kilgore Creative as a production of the Soulworks Group Incorporated. Until next time, take good care.
Dear friend, thank you for spending time with me today. For the past 8 years, Experience of the Soul has been made possible by listeners like you. Right now, we're in the middle of our $9,000 in 90 days campaign, and every gift, no matter the amount or size, helps us continue creating these conversations and keeping them freely available for people around the world. If you'd like to support that mission, you'll find a donation link in the show description. I thank you in advance, and blessings on the journey.